John McMullen. With the win over New York, they now host the Redskins, who lost to Dallas on Thanksgiving, with just one game separating the teams. Week 14, Eagles head to Dallas to face the Cowboys, who beat them in Philly 2 weeks ago. Though the Eagles have done nothing to suggest they're better than any team right now, the following couple of weeks are winnable games for this conversation to matter at all. The Eagles had to beat the Giants. They did. And then we go over Big Blue, gets them at 5-6, one game behind Dallas and Washington, who both sit at 6-5. The Redskins play Philly, New York, Jacksonville, Tennessee, and Philly. Dallas has the Saints, Philly, Indy, Tampa, and the Giants. After this three-game NFC East stretch, the Eagles' schedule continues to be pretty difficult. A trip to L.A. to face the Rams, a home date with the South-leading Texans before closing out the season in Washington. And even though the season has not gone the way that many fans had hoped, the Eagles' schedule breaks kind of well for them. If you think about it, 4, counting yesterday, of their final 6 against NFC East foes. If the Eagles can win those games, that would get them to 8 wins. They would need to steal a game in L.A. or Houston to get to 9, beat both of them to get to 10. 10 wins, of course, probably gets you to division. Also keeps them in the wild card mix if you get to 10. 9 gets them the East, most likely, but not in the wild card. Bottom line, take care of business in the NFC, and a playoff berth, still a pretty strong possibility. Lose any of the 4 games, they got one yesterday, the Eagles most likely going to be home watching the playoffs this Sunday. So, how were they able to get it done and keep their season alive? Let's bring John McMullen in on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. He's brought to you by Harrah's Resort, Bally's Atlantic City, Wild Wild West. They're taking bets at the sports book. Wager today at the book. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And, John, the running game and the law firm of Sullivan, and LeBlanc stepping up yesterday for the Birds.
Yeah, and how about that secondary? Even Chandon Sullivan goes down and is not able to finish the game. So I said before the game, Mike, we got to give it to Jim Schwartz if he's able to pull off a win with that secondary in that type of environment. And obviously it didn't look good early. 346 yards at halftime.
What they changed?
If that's they simplified things, and Malcolm Jenkins kind of explained that. And he went to Jim Schwartz and said, "Look, these guys are just not prepared for the similar." And I addressed this with Doug Peterson and Jim during the week. I was kind of nonplussed at the assumption you always hear the next man up mentality, and that's great, but to assume guys who haven't played, who haven't been in this system, with LeBlanc specifically, are going to be able to communicate on the back end like the typical starters, I thought that wasn't going to work. And it turns out it wasn't going to work.
No.
And they had to scale things back, went to a lot more cover 2, a lot more zone defense. It worked in the second half. Part is also the opponent. Let's be honest, if that's Drew Brees again, you're so far out of that game at halftime, it doesn't even matter. So that enters into the equation as well. But it's difficult to win in this league, and it's especially difficult to win without your top 5 corners. And then you lose number 6 in the game. So that's pretty impressive.
There was some talk about Jenkins going to Schwartz and telling him, "Hey, man, you got to simplify this." Is that true?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, absolutely. Now, it'll be interesting to talk to Jim and see his take on that, because he might have said we have to simplify this. But Malcolm certainly went to him, and it happened after sort of that 1-2 punch in the game. You had Rhett Ellison. That was the play, really, who's a blocking tight end, typically an H-back, a fullback, and he's wide open down the side of the field. Nobody's near him because it's a completely blown coverage. And then you had the big run by Saquon Barkley. That kind of set Malcolm off and said, we need to scale things back. The Eagles did, and it turns out that it worked.
There's a lot of different, intricacies of this game in terms of, key moments. early in the game, Giants go for 2. They're chasing those points all day. They left a lot of points out on the field. I thought that was obviously a big spot because you look back and say, man, they threw 5 points out there. There were different things that could have happened in that game. The interception late at the half, that kind of, kept the game at hand. But I thought on that 3rd and 18, they call timeout, and Camus makes that tackle there, which no one's made that tackle all year. It feels like 3rd and 15 has killed this team all season long. But I thought that was when you started to get the feel that maybe they can get back in this game.
Well, I can't agree with that. I mean, there are certain narratives out there that aren't completely true for whatever reason. People buy into them, and I know nobody likes that picket fence defense, but every time the Eagles have used it, it has worked. Maybe not worked to the degree it wanted to. The 3rd and 14, they gave up 13 yards. Team was going to go for it on 4th and 1, and they got a false start. So that one might have failed. But it's not like the Eagles are giving up 3rd and 17s, 3rd and 18s when they're using that picket fence defense. That worked as it's supposed to work. You're supposed to get the football out of the hands of the quarterback quickly, rally up and make the tackle. But I mean, you have to stop 3rd and 15, 3rd and 16, 4th and 15 in Tennessee. That's the one glaring one where people will point to, and Corey Graham kind of lost focus of where he was on the field. But hey, look, this team has not been good tackling. I agree with you there, but it's not like they're giving up 3rd and 16s, 3rd and 17s consistently. The issue has been obviously the cornerbacks and not being able to cover with numbers 6, 7, and 8 on the roster. And also, I think it's been disappointing in the past number of weeks, the run defense. That's legitimate. And they were bad again for the first half. And then we're able to turn it around, and they deserve credit for that. And as I said, part of it also goes to the opposition.
Yeah. Well, I thought
bad quarterback and bad play call.
Yeah, well, I thought Shermer was a big factor. He was bad. But I also think that the pass rush was definitely more apparent. It was more memorable in this game than almost any game I can recall this year.
Yeah, I mean, they were good, and that's we talked about that a lot. I said they were going to have to get a rush with 4 guys because they were going to have to play coverage on the back end, and they were able to do that for the most part in the second half. So that was a key part of it. Whether you can do that consistently against better opposition, I don't know. But it's certainly, until we can get Jalen Mills back on the field, Devontae Maddox, and at least put, competent NFL players on the field.
Yeah.
You got to get a rush with 4 guys. There's no blitzing. Forget about blitzing. I know everybody wants a blitz. It's not going to happen until the guys who have some experience in this defense are back playing corner.
Yeah, well, we talked about it when Mosher was on with us the first 2 hours of the show for the Mosher Monday, John, which was, everybody asked for more blitzing and more running. Well, they didn't blitz. They were able to pull out a win. Certainly running the ball was a big factor in why they were able to, kind of change that game around.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the run-pass ratio was better. And I know people are going to point to that statistic. They run it 25 or more times, or 5-0. They don't. They're 0-6. So I argue, hey, just run it 26 straight times against the Redskins to start the game. See if you win it that way. I mean, you got to put context.
Well, I think the context here is the fact that they were showing that they would run with Adams made the RPO that they got into in the second half more believable.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff is very helpful. You're right. Sometimes you got to run. Look, the last drive is a perfect example of what you're talking about. Now, the Eagles won the game with the Jake Elliott field goal. That was a 10-play drive that siphoned a lot of time off the clock and basically left the Giants with nothing. So it was perfectly done. Now, they ran the football 6 times. So you take out the field goal, 6 out of the 9 offensive plays were runs. None of them none of them were effective. They won the game throwing the football. It was Alshon Jeffrey, that play where he was able to avoid a few tackles. It was the fourth down throw to Nelson Aguilar. It was after Josh Adams lost a yard, Zach Ertz got 10 back to set up that third and one, which, by the way, they didn't get running the ball, and that set up 4th and 1. So I think on those 6 plays running the football, they got 7 yards. They won the football game throwing the football, and I think people, hey, I talk about it a lot. They lose their minds. And Doug Peterson has talked about this consistently. Part of the reason the numbers aren't where you want them to be at times is because the Eagles haven't converted on third downs. If they don't convert on that third down, if they don't convert on that fourth down, well, those run numbers don't look as good because you don't close out the game with 6 Josh Adams runs. So the coaches always talk about the personality of games. I talk about it a lot. It's true. And the personality of this game and the fact that you were playing the New York Giants instead of the New Orleans Saints enabled you to stick with the run. The week prior, you can't stick with the run because you're playing a high-powered offense.
Right. Well, in the game against the Saints, I think it just that game is just one of those games. It gets away from you. You have the bad day. The Eagles had that game last year out at Seattle where nothing they did. They couldn't do anything right at that game out in Seattle last year. So the Saint game's notwithstanding, they're down 19-3 yesterday, and did not get away from running. They actually went to using that, and for whatever reason, they had success running the ball, but I forget the fact that they had success. They did it, and I thought, like you mentioned, I agree with you, it opened up things. The fourth down pass to Aguilar is there because that RPO holds those linebackers and lets Aguilar, I felt like there was the passing game all year long felt like there was nowhere to breathe, nowhere to go, and yesterday it felt like guys were at least there.
Well, yeah, I think, I don't want to downplay because I just think Josh Adams brings a lot more to this offense than obviously Wendell Smallwood did or even Corey Clement, who also had a good game yesterday, Corey running the football. I think there was that one drive where they played Richard Rodgers. He's on the field for the first time and then playing 13 personnel, and he made 3 consecutive good blocks, and I've been talking all year about not having a tight end that can block. And all of a sudden, he's out on the field, and you see the difference. If you have a guy, and it's not even about pancaking people, it's about having a professional who understands what to do. I think all of that enters into it. But I will say, the guys who won the football game, Carson Wentz, Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Nelson Aguilar. And that's the strength of this team.
Well, they made the big plays.
Yeah, people have to recognize that.
Today, Doug's asked, why did it take you so long to get to the point where, and Corey had his most impactful game. And, do you feel like he maybe just said the heck with it? If I don't trust these guys, we are what we are. We're 4 and I don't have anything to lose. Like, does he trust these guys now?
I thought that came earlier. It was going in. Remember, there was a lot made of that report before the game about going to Josh Adams. That decision was made before last week's game, but it just went in a negative direction. And they weren't able to get the football to him as much as they wanted. He's a talented kid. We put him in the same category, undrafted, back-to-back years. And I know Corey is a Super Bowl hero, and I know he's from Glassboro, and he's a local kid. But if you're talking about talent, pure running ability, this guy was a Heisman Trophy candidate. There's a big difference. And you can see the juice when he runs the football. In the long touchdown run that got called back. He's got a different gear. And if he didn't have injuries, he probably would have been a 3rd or at worst a 4th round pick.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So
and the one thing,
from a skill set level, it's a little bit different.
the one thing too that the run game gives you is it does shorten the game. It makes the clock run a little bit more when you're not converting these passes. An incomplete pass, it keeps the clock. And the fact that game, I thought Shermer calling timeout on the 3rd and 18 instead of just taking the 5-yard 3rd and 15 or whatever it was, instead of just taking the 5-yard penalty, they don't have that timeout late in the game. So every second that came off that clock was meaningful.
Yeah, well, I look at that second half game plan from the Giants' standpoint, and I start to think, is Pat Shermer starting to think he's winning too many games?
I had that same thought. Was he like, you know what? This would be a nice game for us to kind of throw.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I kind of say it joking, but it did cross my mind because, look, they were moving the football. Now, again, they don't score 346 yards in the first half. You should have well more than 19 points. So, I mean, they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. That's what bad teams do. And there was plenty of that from the Giants' perspective. But they just went in the shell in the second half and didn't give the ball to Barkley. And it was strange. And they obviously need a quarterback, and the more games you win, the less impactful your draft choice is going to be. I don't think that's what happened, but that game plan from the Giants' perspective certainly helped the Eagles. I will say that.
Now, I mean, I felt that not going to Barkley was the biggest, issue. Yeah, I mean, Beckham had 9 targets yesterday. He had 5 catches, so, I mean, they tried to go to him a little bit more. He wasn't as successful, but to not go to Barkley was criminal.
Yeah, I mean, I could say it's criminal. It's tough because you know how I feel about Eli Manning, and I don't want to beat the dead horse there, but I think the Eagles have won 18 out of 22, I think is the number, against the Giants.
Yeah, I saw something that McNabb has just as many wins in the last 20 than Manning does.
Now, think about that, Mike. That is a large sample size. That is 11 years of football games. And when we talk about Hall of Fame and potential Hall of Fame quarterbacks, name me another quarterback that lost 18 of 22 games, Hall of Fame quarterback to any team. And the Eagles had some good teams over that span. They also had some bad teams and a lot of mediocre teams. It's not like they were the Patriots dominating throughout that 11-year span. He's not a good quarterback. So, and you've seen some of the video clips of Pat Shermer on the sidelines mouthing things. They've gone viral. Eli throw the football, cursing at his inability. So I thought he was in a bad position coming into this game, and I mentioned it in Countdown to Kickoff, because you want to throw the football when you see Chandon Sullivan and Devontae Ballsby and Crevan LeBlanc. You have to want to throw the football. And if you have confidence in your quarterback, you will throw the football. I don't think he does. And that's why they should have leaned more heavily on Barkley, and they didn't, and it was very, very strange.
So what now? What have we learned now? I mean, the last time they played the Giants, it was, hey, all right, they scored 30-plus points. They won. They didn't even do that yesterday. They still couldn't get over 30 yesterday. The offense still, for whatever reason, you got Alshon Aguilar, Jordan Matthews, Ertz, Tate, and still they can't get up over 30. So what did we learn from yesterday?
I think we learned that they saved their season for one more week, and that's what it's going to be from this point forward. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be pulling teeth. This team's not going to go on a run and all of a sudden be like the Super Bowl champion team of last year. It's not going to happen. There's too many injuries, too many struggles on the offensive side of the football. They're not getting fixed at this point. The positive is the division, we talked about it for a long time, is not very good. It's gotten even worse. Washington has come back to the pack. They don't have their starting quarterback. It starts a week from tonight. If the Eagles win that football game, they're playing for first place in Dallas, which looks like the best team in the division now, which is amazing. If you talk about where they were about 3 weeks ago. But it's going to be nip and tuck the entire way, I think, between these three teams, because none of them are very good. None of them are going to run away from the others. Mm-hmm. But from the Eagles' perspective, I mean, they have to win these division games. They have to win both games against the Redskins, and they have to win in Dallas because they lost and they blew that game here. And if they do that, then you probably have to steal one of the two from the Rams and the Texans, and then you're NFC East champions. That's the path they have to take.
Will they get anybody back to help them get there Monday night?
It's too early. Everything gets pushed back a day, so the big practice day will be Thursday this week. There's hope. Doug listed them all: Jalen Mills, Avonte Maddox. Rasul Douglas actually played a few snaps in that game, not very much, but everybody's day to day. They need as many healthy bodies as possible. And I think there's one bright spot, a couple bright spots in the secondary. One, Cre'Von LeBlanc is an NFL player, and as he gets more comfortable in
Nate
this
Geary
offense,
is not.
Well, it's interesting, and this is one of those silver lining things, and I'm going to be writing about this week. Malcolm Jenkins is just more effective when he's moving all over. And it's interesting because you're right. Jordan Hicks is a heck of a lot better than Nate Geary or KGH or anybody they're going to put at linebacker. But you know what they do when Jordan is on the field? They let Malcolm roam all over. Yesterday he was playing safety. He was playing nickel linebacker. He had to go to the slot after Chandon Sullivan went down. And he had his most effective game of the year. He just gets challenged when he's a chess piece and Jim Schwartz moves him all over the field. And that's why the Eagles were so effective last year after Jordan Hicks went down with the torn Achilles, because Schwartz started to move him all over the field. He played so many different positions last year. This year, he's played safety. He's played box safety. That's it.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden that changed yesterday, and you got the all-pro Malcolm Jenkins.
After the Eagles win over the Giants, how do you feel about them today? Almost 300 votes in. 54% say still not making the playoffs. 46% think the Eagles will win the division. So the win didn't make people, for the most part, buy into them just yet. A win over Washington Monday night might change some things. We'll dive into that game all week long here as the Eagles get to 5-6. Washington is 6-5. Dallas 6-5. Dallas has got the Saints on the schedule. Philly will host the Redskins. John McMullen.
I think everybody's all in after next week if the Eagles win.
If they win.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if they don't, bad situation.
Yeah. All right, man.
Everybody's not holding the door at Wawa.